It is May 8th. The birds are chirping. This is Heidi Hatch with KUTV 2 News and another edition of the Take Two podcast. Mara Carabello is in the house from the Exoro Group, and Greg Hughes, fresh off the radio, hanging out with us. Hello, welcome. So much to talk about, so little time as usual, so glad you're both back at 'em. First thing we have to talk about is that President Trump, busy tweeting. I don't know if he still does his own tweets or if he has people do it for him, but he has backed Robert Axson, who is running for Utah GOP Chair again. He's the sitting chair, against Phil Lyman. And Phil Lyman's people are not happy about this. Like, they're really upset, and they're going back and forth between this isn't Trump tweeting, or we can't trust Trump, or, but wait, he also backed Mitt Romney. So, Mara, your thoughts on this. Is this good or bad for Rob, and is this good or bad for Phil?
I feel like it has to be good for Rob, but it is funny that it has seemed, at least on social media, to draw all the swords. Like, half the people are like, no, this kills him. Half the people are like, it's great. I'm guessing I'll be in a different place than Greg, but endorsements are always a little bit of something and a little bit of nothing. There's kind of what you make of it. I have to say it's probably net plus, just because I feel like Phil Lyman's base is also really open to Trump. And so, I mean, listening to that, and I think that if you were going to ideologically take a swipe, this puts Axson more firmly in a MAGA or a pro-Trump camp. And I think for the delegates, there's nothing but upside to that. He also, it was a long post.
Yes.
Called him fantastic, said he'll never let you down. I mean, it was a big, but like you said, I mean, it was a swift and firm response from the Phil Lyman folks.
Yeah, and Phil Lyman, interestingly enough, he doesn't separate himself from Trump. Instead of the MAGA hat, he's made his own MUGA hats for Make Utah Great Again. So he's running on being Utah's Trump. So while Phil Lyman's followers are not happy about this, and now they're making excuses, I mean, it's got to hurt a little, because he's trying to be Trump 2.0 in Utah.
Sure. I mean, I supported President Trump in 2016 and supported him in 2020. And I was disappointed when I didn't earn the endorsement of Trump. Who did
he endorse? Did he endorse in the race?
Thankfully, no one in that race. But in race for governor or for the special election for Congress. But I was disappointed that I didn't get an endorsement. But it's interesting because in the Senate race in the last cycle, President Trump endorsed Trent Staggs, the mayor of Riverton, early. And there were a lot of good conservatives and a lot of Trump supporters that had different dogs in that race, and so that really made people wonder. Wait a minute, why is he endorsing this person when there's a crowded field running for Senate? And the people that were in this Trent Staggs camp went to the mat on, no, this endorsement, this is gold. This means this is who you should pick. Some of those people and those voices are the ones that support Phil Lyman right now, wondering what's happening with the Trump endorsing Rob Axson. So I think that what happens in politics is that you have people like, look, Rob Axson was a staffer for Mike Lee. Senator Mike Lee has an incredible voice inside that White House. And so it's not a long leap to think that Senator Lee put in a good word for Rob, his former staffer, for the party chair. And Trump's people probably responded. It's interesting in the endorsement, he does point out that Rob is supported by the highly respected Senator Mike Lee and Governor Spencer Cox. He mentions both of them in his press statement he put out on Truth Social. And so, it's going to, whoever the grassroots is, I would think is more strongly in Phil Lyman's camp than in Rob Axson's camp. This endorsement, I think, will give some of the delegates that aren't committed pause, because I think the delegates in the Republican Party in Utah like Trump. So I think that will be a good. Yeah. I think it's a net advantage for Rob to have this endorsement.
And it's also worth noting that Mike Lee did also a couple hours later say, I'm with Trump on this. I support Axson, which, as Greg said, it's not maybe a surprise, but Mike Lee still holds a lot of sway with those delegates. So it's not going to hurt you at all. And I won't be surprised if Mike Lee plays a role in whatever Axson has planned for the convention.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I've already seen that you can see that it has some play in there with some delegates when they're online on social media right now. And some of them are like, I'm Phil Lyman till I die. So we'll watch that. The previous chair before Rob, Colby, what's his last name? Jenkins. It was like it's a J word. He is supporting Rob in this as well, not Phil Lyman, which was interesting. Burgess Owens, after the President Trump tweet, came out and said that he is also supporting Axson as well. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens here, but definitely have people talking ahead of the vote, and that's in 9 days, so May 17th, so we'll be watching that one closely. One vote that is a done deal right now, this shouldn't be political, but in some ways it kind of is. There's a new pope. 1.4 billion Catholics worldwide will have a new spiritual leader in Pope Leo XIV. Surprised by this, Mara?
I think many people were surprised that it was an American. So it's the first American pope of, what are we at? Maybe 276 popes, I think.
A lot of popes.
A lot of popes. So first American, a really big deal. He's a polyglot, though. Like he was born in Chicago. He apparently, like, chasing down the important things. Apparently, he was a White Sox guy, not a Cubs guy. And he grew up, couple of brothers, but pretty quickly after graduate school has lived in Peru, for like 20, 25 years, speaks Spanish and Italian. I think that a lot of people thought it was going to be an Italian pope. He's going to be interesting for people because I think he was chosen partly in his ability to consensus build. He was appointed by Pope Francis, and he worked at the Vatican, but he also is a standard bearer a little bit for Vatican process, which Pope Francis wasn't. He was a disruptor. So he came out with a strong speech about
Are you allowed to say if you like the choice or not, or is that something that
it seems good. I don't know him, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone knows him. I think it's pretty cool that it's an American. You saw Donald Trump say it was an honor to have someone from the United States today. So I think it's historic. We've never had an American pope. What becomes interesting is a lot of the stories today were about a superpower gets a pope, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of conflating. I'm not so sure that this priest is not thinking of geopolitics.
Oh, I think America's back, baby. I think it's America. It's America first all over again. If this isn't just another example of America first.
Pretty quick trip,
if you're
though.
God's chosen, like, aren't you just a child of God? You're not like a U.S.
I
or whatever.
think that's what they're going to assert. But yeah, interesting choice. He spoke in Spanish and in Italian.
Yeah, and there's a lot of emotion there when he came out and he spoke. I watched it live. There's two things that I liked about today. First off, I didn't know this till today that half the Christian population on the planet is Catholic by faith. I didn't know that. I didn't know that it represented such a large percentage of the Christians that on Earth. So I think that it's because it's still a big deal, because it's still a front of mind. It is big news who the Pope is. Part of me would think in 2025, in a secular world, we wouldn't care anymore. We would be not care. I just think it speaks well that we care and that this is a big moment. And when you saw the people and how emotional they were, it was real touching to me to see that. And I shy away from wanting to politicize it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to. I did read today an article that was written in the New York Times at the very beginning of the month, and they said the odds are you're not going to see an American become Pope. But if you did, this guy, what's his real name?
Robert Frances Prevost.
I like to call him Bob. So Robert Frances Prevost. They did a kind of a profile on him, and they did describe him as kind of a middle of the road. They talked about some of the things he was concerned about doctrinally, about how, about what kids are taught or what should happen there. He also is a person that takes you where you are, and he loves everyone, and he really thinks that, at the time he was talking about bishops, you don't sit in your little kingdom, that you are with the people, you suffer with the people. And so the way the article described him as, and it was just kind of a profile. If it were an American, it might be this guy.
Yeah.
It was that he was kind of a person that would satisfy people that wanted to see more of the doctrine emphasized, and then people like Pope Francis, where they were more, dare I say, liberal, but more of the, I don't know, just
digging into world issues. He was talking war and
I mean,
immigration.
and he seemed to be kind of someone that could walk that line very carefully, and it was Pope Francis that, or is Pope. Who's the last pope? Is
Francis.
It Francis,
yeah.
That appointed him a cardinal in 23, and he's been working in the Vatican since. So he was close to the Pope. So I think there's a lot of reasons why, and I think that he's the reason it only took 4 votes, because sometimes it can take up to 3 days, is because he's someone that could appeal to the different interests that they were looking at for the next pope.
I do like you mentioned, that it's still news, because I like to look at people as still wanting faith in their lives and looking towards these things as something to hold up on a pedestal. So I think that's a good thing for the world right now. Just wanted to mention really quickly, here in Utah this week, there were some meetings going on with the One World Trade Center talking Utah tariffs. Former CIA Director and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was here. Did either of you go to those meetings the last couple of days?
I didn't, but what an all-star. I mean, Anthony Blinken, Condoleezza Rice.
Some big names.
A bunch of ambassadors, some really big names, big draw over 2 days. Governor, was certainly there, but it seemed a big event, and it seemed like the intent of this group is to make it a big event. Lots of comments. This is the second year that they've kind of had this heavy A-list group of folks, and I think it appears as though their intent is that it's a major event, a can't-miss event, and it also happens to be in Utah.
Yeah. I like that we're talking about how to deal with tariffs on a local level, too, as a state, because, well, we're a big country and we all have to deal with the tariffs. I think that states have a lot of ability to work on who they're working with, partners overseas and whatnot. I know that some Utah leaders are heading to Spain in the fall. So, Greg, a good thing to have in Utah, or it doesn't really matter because they're going to meet somewhere?
I think you need to be proactive. I think every state, as I learned serving in the legislature, you have a lot of say as a state, what your imports, exports look like, how you're able to build those relationships with other countries. All the states do it. I was surprised as the Speaker of the House here in Utah, when I went abroad, you saw states that had offices in certain countries that had large ports, and they were domiciled there to make sure their states had that kind of robust trade internationally. So I think our state should. And I think that we're in the event right now of Trump's negotiations with trade partnerships, and I think the one with the UK today that was announced was a great one. I think that you saw those tariffs change very drastically from what they used to be. You saw a great, I think it's a $5 billion investment from Boeing on Rolls-Royce engines. Some of the non-trade barriers were lowered. I thought the agreement was a great one, and I think we're going to see more of those coming down the line. But until we start to see that, it's hard to really, I hear a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking on what Trump's, if he succeeded or failed on his, realigning trade partnerships. But I think this first one is far better than what the status quo was prior to it. So I think we had to just let the man cook and see what happens in the coming weeks and months.
A good resource that I did see related to this was, because the Trump tariffs are so not fixed, because they're so evolutionary, World Trade Utah does now post any tariff. They have a whole section in real time that is keeping up with the tariffs, and they have a section on how it impacts Utah. It's a great little dashboard. So if you go to, I don't know what their email, WTC, I think, Utah, they have a nice dashboard so you can keep up with what's going on in the tariff world.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. And if you're interested in that conversation, cameras weren't allowed in there. So Governor Herbert, who was there and listening, came in and talked to me about it yesterday. Cool. We posted that online too. So if you're listening to the podcast, go back one edition, and then you can listen to the governor and what he had to say coming out of that as well. This is not really political, but I feel like it becomes political when we're talking about money in Utah. So the Utah Hockey Club, where a lot of money's headed right now, finally chose their name, Utah Mammoth. Greg, are we loving it or hating it?
I love it. I just think it's like the Utah Republicans. It's just
So
a
it's just like a
prehistoric
hairy elephant?
It's the Utah Republicans. I just think it's beautiful.
I like the way we're thinking here.
I loved your email that kind of gave us the topics because I didn't know we had a mammoth
I
found
looked that
here
up
in
because
Utah.
people were mad.
A plethora of information
Yeah.
you provided, and I'm excited. I do. I really like it, and I think it's got to be tough. I mean, I was in Pittsburgh. You're born with the names of your teams. You didn't pick them; they were just there when you were born, and so you don't think twice of it. Picking a name for a sports franchise is a tough deal, and I think they did a great job. I like it. I like the logo. I think they did a good job.
I like the logo. They did. I mean, I like the name's good. I liked the Yeti better, but I understand that wasn't a
Lawsuits.
That wasn't a
legal
hockey
issue with
problem.
that.
That
Yeah.
was, and I didn't actually hate the Utah Hockey Club, but their logo, the depiction of the mammoth, is super cool. Actually,
Yes, it is.
It's good, and the color scheme stays the same, and I think it's a sharp color scheme. And to Greg's credit on this one, you did point out that the major mammoth in Utah is the Huntington rabbit,
mammoth.
which
Yeah.
is a hairless version, and they do look a lot
I know.
like an elephant.
I went down a rabbit hole or a mammoth hole yesterday
You
because
did.
You
I
did. I
just
was like-
loved this. I was
I know.
like, you got to be
So
kidding me. I
gotta
did
te-
not know any of this.
I got to tell you a few of these things because people were really mad online, being like, "What does a mammoth have to do with Utah?" And I was like, "Yeah, what does a mammoth have to do with Utah?" So I started Googling, and we've had quite a few mammoths found here in Utah, or at least pieces of them. So the last major find was 10 years ago in Fillmore, Utah, where they found tusks. Tusks up is going to be the big hashtag they're using in the cheer for the team. There was the Columbian mammoth, the hairless one that Mara just mentioned, which is the most famous, the Huntington mammoth. And they believe it was from 1 million to 10,000 years ago, somewhere in that broad spectrum. And it was discovered in 1988 in the Manti La Salle National Forest. And over the years, other pieces of bones have been
30
found. Yeah.
different places
Yeah. So mammoths
around the state.
roamed the state of
So
Utah.
not 30
practically
places
our
around where
state
this
animal.
mammoth fell. We're talking 30
Yeah.
places around the state.
Yeah, because the Huntington one, I think it was a whole mammoth. Like,
Yes,
he died there.
I just am super
yeah.
intrigued by
So
this.
anyhow, if you want to do a little digging into that, the internet has all kinds of great information. The Forest Service has it in some of these places that it was found. So I was like, oh, I kind of like that. Mammoths. Let's do
Yes,
it.
I
We are
like
the
it.
mammoths.
No, it's not with an S. I think it's just
Oh yeah,
mammoth.
it's just that was my problem with it. I wanted it to end with a Z, like mammoths, multiple, but like sort of like a mammoth.
Everything ends with a Z.
Yeah.
You know,
What's
mammoth.
the mascot?
would be
A
hard.
mammoth? Like,
They
are they
haven't-
doing a random
they haven't
mascot
said
like
yet.
a bird? Or have you noticed sometimes I don't like when the mascot doesn't need to relate, but
Like they're
I
just going to have
assume-
like a caveman or
Phillies
something to go with
thing.
it.
yeah. Well, he's an exception. I feel
Yeah.
like, but
But you got the jazz bear. He's not,
right,
he's
like
nothing
it's
with
just
jazz.
yeah, exactly.
No, this has to be. You got to have a mammoth.
Right?
I
get
know,
that.
but do you have a costume that has two people in it so you can have a front and a back?
No,
hook,
I think that'd
or
be
is
no,
too
it
there's
one?
hard.
nothing cool about a two-person.
You'd be stumbling down the
no,
stairs.
that's not cool.
If you want to go, I looked it up online because Colorado's kind of mad. They have a team that's the Colorado Mammoths,
Yeah.
and they have a mammoth. He looks kind of warm and cozy. I feel like we're gonna go meaner and like, I don't know,
Yeah.
gruffer. I'd like then like Snuffle Up, I guess, from Sesame Street. Was he a mammoth or like what
That's
was
so
he?
funny you
That
should
is
say that. That was a
interesting.
picture on the wall of the newsroom at the radio station.
Oh, really?
Yeah, someone made that joke. It looks like Snuffleupagus.
I
Interesting.
forgot about him.
Yeah.
He's probably a mammoth.
Probably. Anyhow, we have hairless ones here in Utah. Speaking of sports here in Utah, Salt Lake County signed over part of the Salt Palace Convention Center to Smith Entertainment Group. I was slightly surprised by how controversial this has been on social media and how upset people have been. I kind of figured this was sort of baked into the original deal when Ryan Smith was saying, I'm going to take the team out of, Salt Lake City, and it was kind of a done deal. But Mara, people are mad about this. They don't like that preferential treatment is going towards the Smith Entertainment Group because they have enough cash on their own. Is there reason to be mad about this deal?
I don't like the deal structure. I think Smith Entertainment Group has been a good partner, so this
Yeah.
is not aimed at them. But it's a public space. It's a revenue generator. It's related to tourism. It's related to drawing in conventions. It's got a lot of uses.
And we just built a giant hotel to
And we
hook to
just
it.
built a giant hotel. What I would have liked to have seen is a more traditional structure, which would have been a long-term lease agreement. And so you sort of acknowledged the role of Smith Entertainment Group. You gave them some preferential tax status when it comes to incentivizing them to build out their district. I am uncomfortable with a public space having sections that are privately owned. I would rather have a public space that has long-term private leases. I think it's a better protection for taxpayer dollars. I think it incentivizes the business structure to do better. This feels a little bit like too good of a deal. And so I am a critic of the county. So you saw a mayor that's totally on board, and you also saw a council that's on board. So to some degree, I don't want to paint a gallery. They all did their work, but it's not the partnership with Smith Entertainment. It's the structure of the deal. And it also, they weren't listening to the planners on this. And things seem great right now, but this is a long-term deal. Yeah. The other thing I'll just say is Smith Entertainment Group is revitalizing this part of downtown. Mike Mon is a serious actor. These guys are good players. Having said all that, their track record of team ownership is only 2 years old. Like, I'm not doubting them, but I just, as a protector of public taxpayer dollars, I would be more comfortable with a different tax structure.
So I tried to read I thought I understood the deal, and then I read the article about it, and I was more confused than when I started. I was
we
told
should have posted the whole contract online. It's a pretty big contract.
Well, I was told that bottom line it was 6.5 acres for $55 million, and if that is the deal, then that is a smoking deal, because there isn't 6.5 acres of Salt Lake City proper D1 zone that's $55 million. That's underpriced by a lot. And then when you take the building,
what does an acre cost in downtown Salt Lake City?
I off the top of my head, I don't know, but I will tell you that it's a lot more than $55 million. Yeah. And so, but that comes with the building too. I don't. When I read it, and I read that it was there was a back end payment at the very end, I became confused on the terms. So maybe I'm oversimplifying it. But if at the end of the day, somebody without a bid, without anyone else competing for what that project could look like, would look like, partners that could help make that space what it's supposed to be for the purposes of keeping those teams downtown. If it is $55 million for 6.5 acres in downtown Salt Lake, and it was single sourced, I think it's too good of a deal. I do. I think it's too rich. But look, I mean, I think Ryan Smith has been able to, in 2 sessions in a row, basically tell the city and any stakeholder inside this city, if you don't do it, I'm going south. I'm going to go to where the prison location is, or I'm going south. I've got a practice facility over there, Southtown and Sandy. I'm out of here. And I think too many people do not want to lose that anchor presence of professional NBA and NHL team there and the Delta Center and its legacy. And so people are pretty much willing to do whatever it takes to get there. But I don't know if they noticed, but he's picked up on that. I don't know how many times he gets to retrade that deal.
Or else deal.
If you're going to keep retrading this, I'd like to know where the end comes, because it's now 2 years in a row where he's been able to say, I'm going to leave it if, and the if that he's provided. And I just think at some point,
yeah,
either go or stay, but I don't think any more has to be thrown into the pot at this point.
Yeah, you can't keep the rightening. It is interesting watching, in contrast, the Miller Group, who built up the new B Stadium out in South Jordan, and they're doing an entertainment area around it as well. It's going up very quickly. That's all privately funded. So the Millers are doing it all with their own money, not tax dollars. This will happen slower, and I don't know. We'll have to see how it turns out with tax and private dollars involved. So two definitely different deals, and yeah, the temper tantrum. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
This was interesting right after we had our cop friend in here with us last week. We were talking about, what is the word? My brain is tired. We were talking about drug trafficking and how there have been some busts here in the state of Utah and across the country, and that really they were kind of a drop in the bucket without cartels and some of those massive busts happening, whether it's happening on a train or a boat. So former Chief Chris Burbank, who was here with us last week, was saying, that's when you really get those big busts. And then right after we talked about that, there was an announcement that came that there was the largest fentanyl bust in DA history happened this week. They seized over 400 kilos of fentanyl in a record-shattering operation. This was still not a boat full, it was not a train full, but it was the biggest bust. And sadly enough, there were only 5 states involved, and Utah was on the list, Layton, Utah. And so I was kind of sad to see that. They went to a storage unit and walked away with $780,000 in U.S. currency and cash. and then took over a Dodge Mammoth. There's a theme for this week, worth $150,000. Mara, are you surprised when you hear part of a bust that big from the Sinaloa cartel in Utah, or is this everywhere these days?
I think it's everywhere. What I wanted to find, so this is a big deal, right? And this should be touted as it is. If you look at this subject, it's page after page of really doing a good job by both the administration and DEA saying, wow, this is a really big deal. You asked a question, though, that I did a little looking up because I was like, I don't have any context, and it seems to happen a lot in which I see a story and I'm like, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
So I was trying to figure out how many fentanyl tablets we normally. So this is over 2 million. Unequivocally, like hands down, big event for DEA, a big event.
And then a bunch of
the
powder
drug
too
dealers.
that hadn't been made into pills.
Totally
maybe,
a bunch of stuff, good stuff. So when I looked it up, I found a source that had fentanyl tablet, illicit drug.
Oh, you can buy them?
No, just how long we had seized them by year. And so this was from a source of the National Institute of Drug Abuse. They've been around for a couple decades. They just chart different things related to drug use. So in the number of individual pills containing illicit fentanyl seized by law enforcement by year. 2023 was the last year they had statistics, and there were 115 million plus. It's about 115 million and actually a half, almost 116 million tablets in the year of 2023 seized by law enforcement. So that was helpful because that, for me, still makes this drug bust a big deal. Like, yep, you get one time you're getting over 2 million pills. This is a really big deal. But it speaks to the question of, okay, but I don't know, what's the, how big? How much are we talking about? How much are Americans consuming? 2023, law enforcement seized 115 million tablets. So this is a big bust, but it's, less than 0.5% if you probably looked at the overall tablets. So it's both a big deal and both we have still a really big problem with local law enforcement and federal law enforcement keeping up with our appetite for fentanyl.
I know.
Criminal enterprises, cartels, gangs, they have a supply chain. They're just not working in big 18-wheeler trucks and big cargo boats and cargo airplanes. They're working all the way down to the street name and the individuals working on the corner. That's how they do it. They have it all the way down. They're not just 30,000 feet up in the sky. They're everywhere. The people they bring across, they don't shove it all in their pockets to get over here. They use, as was talked about last week, boats and trucks and planes. But if you think, or anyone thinks, that the people that come across aren't indebted to these cartels that bring them here, they are. Okay, and because they're the mules, they're the ones. 85 kilograms of powder. That's 187 pounds of powder, of fentanyl powder. Forget the pills for a second. The reason people are dying from fentanyl is it's because you have just a tiny micro. They measure this in micro doses.
Yeah, the dose can kill you.
187 pounds of this powder that if you have the micro dose wrong will kill you. The amount of people that 187 pounds of fentanyl can kill is astronomical. Again, go away from the pills. 187 pounds of this powder is as lethal as you can imagine. So I'm just going to say, this stuff didn't just get here by itself. They have people. They have enterprises. They are organized. And they have controlled that both borders, the North and the South, for quite some time. And it's been I've argued, the only supply chain that's actually been profitable since 2020. And I think that when you see these busts happen, and I think you'll see more of them, just know it didn't start yesterday. This is something that grows on itself. This is something that they diversified, potentially, if the charges are true and everyone's innocent until proven guilty, they diversified into oil and gas because they're doing all kinds of things. They're stealing the gas from the federal government, from Mexico, and bringing it in. You know what the margin on stolen gas is? 100%.
I do not. Oh, I'm like, 100%. I do not. Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
When you steal something, you got an incredible margin on stolen items. So the margin on oil and gas that's stolen is just beautiful. It's way better than extracting it yourself or processing. It's a great business. All of this is interconnected. When you see the arrests, when you see the value of what's in Utah versus these other states, we should be worried. We should be worried as communities. We should feel like, because all states are border states at this point, because this is spread throughout the country. And by the volumes that are being reported, we're just not lucky enough to see the silver bullet. This isn't the only thing that's ever happened, and we just happened to stumble, and the federal government just stumbled across it, and this was the only thing. If we're finding this, how much didn't we find? I shudder to think. Yes. Yeah. I think it's a very, very dangerous circumstance that we're in right now, or situation that we're in. And I think it deserves all of our serious attention. And I think if we romanticize one aspect of it, we're being naive.
I'm just sad there's a market for it.
I was going to say, I think this is about drugs. I think this is about consumption. So in 2017, this same chart tells us that less than 50,000 pills were seized in 2017. Now we're at 115 million. I mean, that's
Are they getting better at finding it, or do you think they're just bringing more in? I don't know. I'm asking. I think
law enforcement, with no criticism towards law enforcement, is probably not seizing most of it, and that's not because they're not trying, right? And so if you let's just say that law enforcement seizes half, which is not true. No, but let's just say they seize half. Well, that puts today's numbers of seized at 230, which means the total is 500 million pills. And that's, to your point, pills. That's not even.
Yes.
But 2017, there were less than 50,000. So our appetite for drugs, and this is coupled with the potency of the drug going up. This is not just like, to Greg's point, you get more with a pound, you get more harm. And we know this from overdoses, but we also just have to address our appetite for drugs, because there is demand and the supply is meeting that demand. Yeah. So why do we have the demand? How do we cut down on the demand? Because what we know is we can't chase down the supply.
Yeah.
It's too hard. It's too expensive. They're too organized. Now, that's going to be always a part of it. But until we take a look at why we have the drug problem that we do, who has the drug problem that it is, because it's in every socioeconomic segment in America.
Yeah, nobody's missing it.
There's no one who is not impacted by this quantity. And we're just talking about fentanyl. Yeah. We're not talking about oxy. We're not talking, we still have got some good old-fashioned cocaine hanging around. Like, we're not talking about all illicit drugs. And we're certainly not talking about prescription drugs.
The appetite's great, and that's what's feeding it, and that's all true. But you don't get arrests like this with a fatalist attitude, like, we'll never stop it, so we may as well not even try. You have to absolutely decide as a country that you're going to do everything in everything humanly possible to stop this. And these cartels cannot continue to profit the way they have. The more they profit, the more powerful they become. And some of this appetite we weren't born with. They bring it in. They can find vulnerable people. They can go and introduce these drugs to people that didn't know it from anything else before. And the more they make, I am so worried that within even the halls of Congress, I worry that their influence could be so much more deeper and pervasive than we even understand. And I'm going to tell you, I think it's a very dangerous time that we're living in right now.
But it's not fatalistic, Greg, to insist that you work on the supply side and the demand side.
No, I agree.
And when you only work on one of the sides, and they're very different approaches, which is why it's complicated.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and part of that complicated piece of the puzzle too, this week there was another summit going on, and it was about homelessness that was going on. Governor Cox was there as well, and I know they had some family members of people who'd lost loved ones who ended up being homeless because they were just drawn to drugs that got to be a bigger and bigger problem, so they ended up being part of the homeless population. And I think there were some parents there talking about their adult son who just was, drawn towards the drug lifestyle into Salt Lake City because that's where you could get the drugs. So, I mean, it's a real problem, as you mentioned. It's happening to people in every socioeconomic background. So, yeah, I think dealing with that is going to be a big part of trying to make an end to that. So hopefully we can get in that direction. If you guys are thinking about wanting the government to have more control over you, luckily it does, because as of May 7th, yesterday, there are new laws going into effect from the legislative session. You both have a cup of water. I got special out of the kitchen,
I saw that.
Fluoride free.
Good.
I know.
Thank goodness.
Yes, so there you go.
Should we see how refreshing it is?
Yes, see if it's refreshing. If we could get rid of the chlorine taste in my water,
that'd be good.
Yeah, I would love that.
Is it the water? Is it do you taste?
I taste it. Do you know what the funny thing is when I moved from Florida back to Utah, I was so relieved by the water because it tastes so clean compared to swamp water. But after I had COVID, I can't drink water from the tap for some reason. It just tastes like
funky.
pure chlorine to me.
What about your smell?
So I filter
Can
it.
you smell?
I still can't smell. And I listened to a podcast this week on that issue from the Huberman Lab. Have you heard of him? Super smart guy, but he was talking about your brain health is only as good as your ability to smell, your olfactory senses.
Wow.
That's
and I
not
was like,
fair.
So then I was like, oh my gosh, that's why I can't think of words sometimes because my nose won't work. So I'm very concerned about that. But you can enjoy your fluoride-free water. There are some dental schools around the area. If you can't afford the fluoride treatments on your teeth, they're willing to do them for free for you right now.
I haven't checked on this wonky question, but have you checked with any of the districts to see if they were left? They were really they had a supply
to get rid of it. Yeah,
and
that's
they
on my
knew
list.
they had to finish it, and they were like, "Dang."
Florida just banned theirs too.
Yeah, so you have to get rid of this inventory.
Yeah, and there's different things
Maybe
you
they're
have to do
selling it
to
to
dispose
fluoride
of it.
states.
Yeah, I actually have that on my list
Give
of
it to
like
the
calls
cartels.
to
They'll
make.
get rid of it.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do.
Yeah, so I'm interested to know too because I mean they come in like big amounts when you think what you have to put in a massive water supply. It's not little. So I'll have an answer for you next week on this podcast.
I want to know how they did. With
Yes,
their
and
supply.
if you're ever concerned, you can now just go to your pharmacist and ask them for a prescription, which is really over the counter now. If you would like those fluoride tablets, if you are missing it in your water. Salt Lake City was getting a little fancy this week, knowing that a new law was going into effect. We've talked about it here that schools and cities could only be flying flags of the government, and a couple others included, and that meant pride flags were out. And so Mara Carabello, they were creative. They figured out a way to make 4 flags for the city, and they basically just put the Sago lily on them. Was this a smart workaround for the law, or is this bad behavior by a city who will not comply?
Well, I mean, so she did it well, right? Mayor Mendenhall did it well, as she does most of her public relations. It looked good. She had a wall of them right behind her.
They were lit
She
nicely.
did it. They were lit nicely. She unrolled it with a little bit of drama. The council needed to vote on it. So from a public relations point of view, and frankly, I think from a Salt Lake City, who she does represent, point of view, they didn't mind a good old-fashioned, she did comply with the law, frankly. And she complied with the letter of the law. The criticism from the legislature has been keep her eyes on the prize. This is a waste of time. She should be focused on real things. Yeah, right back at you. So if you think this is a stupid issue, then it should be a stupid issue for everybody. And if you're going to want to legislate at this micromanagement level, then expect that people aren't going to like the micromanagement. I don't think this discussion was worthy of the 45 days that these guys have. So therefore, I'm not so sure that Salt Lake City didn't respond in the like. I just don't see that I like the hypocrisy of it. If this was a waste of Salt Lake City's time, I say to the bill sponsor, then it was a waste of your time. So I don't know that these are the issues of the day. I think this is a cultural battle. Cultural battles matter. Symbols matter to people. These things make everyone hot. And if you question it, go look at the comment section of any of the articles about this. I mean, people are worked up about it. People are stressed out about it. There's a ton of finger pointing here. But I do think I'm really tired of what I see as closer to otherings and abilities to separate, lots of good arguments on both sides, but they're cultural issues. And I would like our government to go back to my potholes. I would like them to go back to my infrastructure. I would like them to go back to the work at hand.
Yeah, I think I think they're just giggling. They think they've been clever. They found a legal loophole. They found 4 flags that they can go and call their city flag that flies in the face of the law that was passed. Look, if they want to be clever, if they think that's a big win for them, they did have a tax increase to consider on the agenda that day. So it was a good, distraction from that discussion.
I didn't even notice the tax increase. They tricked me.
Yeah, so no one did. But that's probably, I'm sure that's part of it. But anyway, I think it's a show that I host. It took up an hour of callers that were really energized, who were upset about it. We had the mayor of Midvale, who's gay, who did an op-ed and asked him because he felt like it was appropriate. So we interviewed him. Here's the problem when you want to be inclusive. Who gets to be in that club of inclusivity? You have an LDS church. This is their headquarters here in Salt Lake City that do a lot of heavy lifting to preserve the city or make sure the city stays viable on a lot of different fronts. Are we including them in those flags? What about our veterans who have a high suicide rate with post-traumatic syndrome and everything else? I think the quickest way to take a melting pot of a nation of all races, creed, and color is to keep having us all stare at each other's differences, whether it's our sexuality, our color, our gender, you name it. Let's just keep telling each other we're different. Let's have our own flags, and then let's wonder why we all fight with each other. Can we all rally around a flag? The United States flag, the Utah flag, a city's flag. The point of the bill, and I think that we would be healthier as a society, is if we found the common ground that didn't mean you're included and we see you, but by virtue of us seeing you, there's no one else. If I had I have 3 kids. If I have one kid's picture on my desk, okay, and I don't have the other kids on that desk, okay, I don't think that the other 2 would feel all that included now, would they? If I only had the one kid's picture on the desk. If everyone wants to do that on their own time, fine, but can government at least just be to the potholes and to the service that all taxpayers, without regard to who they are or what community they represent, have a government that they walk in and see flags that aren't exclusive or inclusive, but are just the state, the city, and the U.S.? I think it would simplify it. I think it would just be simple. But they wanted to be clever, and if I'm a legislator, I would think, all right, if they don't want to be, I think it's unserious, and if they don't want to be serious, I wouldn't treat them as.
So Greg answered the question of, was it a good move? Yeah, he just spent an hour and they just set up shop in all the conservatives' heads. So it was a great political strategy. It matched. If you didn't want to have this conversation, if you thought this was a waste of time, then you shouldn't have brought it up via legislation. Like, to act like this wasn't a response to something.
It was a noble goal to
naive.
Want to depoliticize our government buildings.
It wasn't that goal. That wasn't the intent at all. We hadn't had a problem to date. And
we haven't had a problem because the only flags we've had are the ones you like. That's why it's not a problem. I don't see MAGA flags up there. I don't see other flags. And the fact that Greg is still
so lit about this,
yeah.
I think that's
just
an
a one-way
indictment.
street. It's a one-way street for you.
An hour
that as long as the flags are what that check your virtue signaling box, then you're fine with it. It's all great. But the second it was something you don't believe in, that flag would be divisive, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
No, not for me.
Okay.
But like you mentioned the LDS Church. The LDS Church is going to, when they open up Temple Square again, we're all presuming that they're going to have that amazing Christus. I mean, it is so spectacular. I imagine that it's spectacular for non-Christians. I imagine that those symbols can be welcoming.
Is it a government building?
Whether we're talking about symbols, and I just think that symbols can mean things to people.
So why can't people that are LDS find their flag inside that Salt Lake City building?
I think they do, because you're imagining that those flags don't include people.
There's 4 of them.
You're imagining
Show me the LDS symbols in those 4 flags.
You're imagining that you don't see LDS people in there. Maybe you do. You're imagining that those don't include you. Maybe they do. You're the one who's deciding that those flags don't include you. Those
so there's no symbols
that
symbolize specific communities or just whatever you want it to be.
This was an answer looking for a problem. And if you didn't like Salt Lake's response, it's just an indictment to the original legislation. The original legislation was about bringing up divisiveness. It was about dividing people. And those who didn't like Salt Lake's response, they're right. Salt Lake's response was also in response to a cultural war. They're both responding to cultural wars. I'm just saying we need to stop looking at so many message bills, so much virtue signaling on both sides. I thought that Salt Lake City's response was clever as a cultural response. Was it a waste of their time? Probably, as was the original piece of legislation.
I wouldn't take that city seriously if I were in the legislature. I'd just say, you want to be cute and funny? You just be cute and funny on your own.
Well, you've shown yourself to have that attitude for a decade.
I know.
So that's not new for you. That's not new for right of center.
That's why when we had to do something in that city, we did it because that city couldn't do it themselves.
That's not new for the patronizing. That's not new for the supermajority. That's not new for anything, Greg. That's an old book of hatred that has lived there for a very long time.
What's hatred about it? It's because you don't get it your
just
way.
Going to be Salt
Okay.
Lake.
Salt Lake is Salt Lake. But here's what they do. They represent the people in their city, which is their goal.
Because there's no one but gay people in this city? Those 4 flags represent 100% of that city and the taxpayers of that city?
But I am a straight,
everyone.
cis, middle-aged woman,
Yeah.
and I see myself in the LGBTQ flag.
Great.
I see that as
glad
an
you do.
accepting symbol.
And
I
can
am
you
not
imagine a world where
threatened
everyone
by
doesn't
any of
think the
those.
same way you do? Do you think that there is a world
I'm a
where-
minority member
where-
in the state of Utah, so don't
this
you
is what-
dare.
this is what I love
don't
about
you
you,
dare,
okay?
Greg,
If
sit
the
and tell
world
me that
doesn't
I
see-
don't understand
if
being
the
a
world doesn't
minority.
see- if the world doesn't see things
Oh,
your way,
please.
they lack. There's
I
some
had
moral
no
failing,
idea
isn't
we
there?
were gonna
Isn't
get
there a
this.
moral
Greg's been
failing
mad
that they
at me all
don't
week.
see? If they don't
for you-
subscribe to your worldview, they got a moral failing, don't they?
For you
Isn't that the
to
case?
lecture me about not understanding other people's
Yeah.
worldview when I'm left of center and in the politics
know.
of Utah.
Boo-hoo.
No,
You've
I'm
done
not
so
complaining.
poorly, haven't you?
I'm not complaining. I'm telling you the audacity
Oh,
for you to
please.
suggest that I don't
No.
understand what it is
You
like
have
to be a
premise
minority.
That if people don't subscribe to your worldview, they
Nobody
suffer from a
in
moral
Utah
failing.
subscribes
That's what
to
you're
my
saying.
moral view.
You say I accept those flags. Well, you don't speak for everybody.
Greg, do I
You
work
don't.
with?
I want to
Did you
know
know
what
that?
work with
started
both sides
this
of the
problem.
aisle.
Were you guys fighting over something else earlier
He
this
got
week
mad at me
before you
last
came
week.
in?
Yeah, we came in.
Because
I
that's what I
didn't
need to
come
know
in
about.
mad.
Because I feel like we need some marriage counseling right now, but really just friendship counseling to figure out how we work through this. Because flags should really not be the issue that takes down this friendship.
I agree. I don't know that flags should be the issue we're spending this much
No, you
time
just
on.
have to be where she's at, or you just suffer from a moral failing. That's all. That's all.
Right. Greg,
That's
you
all.
can keep saying that. It doesn't make it true.
We'll get back to another issue that Greg enjoys. Also, another new law that came into effect May 7th, which was yesterday, was now Class A misdemeanors were only punishable as of 2019 up to 364 days, so 1 day shy of a year. That made it so people could still be deported, but there wasn't the chain of command pass off where if you were there for a year, you could automatically go into ICE deportation and it could happen smoothly. In 2019, when the bill passed at the time, my understanding was that it was going to make it harder, so deportations weren't triggered automatically. Now they can be with Class A misdemeanors. Judges don't have to give them a year, but they can. Greg, is this a good thing, or will this catch people up in this who are committing like a Les Mis type crime where they're stealing bread to keep their family alive, which is an argument.
This 364 was a rigged up bill to begin with, and I don't know that the lawmakers were ever explained what the intent of that was supposed to be.
Were
if
you
there is
speaker
a
when
year,
that happened?
No, thankfully, this didn't get by me. I'm not the one that let this by. But I don't actually blame the lawmakers because I don't think anyone was said. I don't think the argument was ever made in that legislature, and I haven't listened to the debate to know, but I cannot imagine that when you had a 365 or 1 year penalty, they said, guys, can we make it 364 days so that we can avoid the penalty of deportation if it's a year? Because if it's a year, it triggers deportation, and we don't want that to happen, so let's make it 1 day less.
I think that was part of the conversation.
well,
when I went back and looked at some stories
It was,
from
and it
at
was
the time.
focused at the time on refugees and immigrants.
Yeah.
So it was a really refugee. This is a bill that was sponsored by a Republican, and it was very refugee community centric. And it was, in fact, worried that you would take away individual process and that there might be extenuating circumstances, particularly in a refugee setting, and that they were trying to give it so that you would have legal representation. It's always the discretion of law enforcement to deport has always been there. It doesn't require this bill to deport. So it wasn't a matter of can you deport people. It was a matter of the process that you would have to take to deport and what are enhanced. So one of the arguments made by Republicans this year, there were a few Republicans who didn't like this bill.
Todd Weiler was one of them.
Todd Weiler was one. And Todd Weiler made a good point in which he was like, what are the unintended consequences? They did clean it up. It didn't make it out of committee, remember? So this was muscled politically through on the floor. The Senate had more problems with this bill. And the Senate made some things that made it so particularly some churches wouldn't unintentionally get caught up in this. But the argument against this was that you can already deport under these circumstances. Why don't you make it an enhanced? And what the many trial attorneys were concerned about is that you couldn't take any mitigating factors in now. It was an automatic. It lessened essentially the process, the individualization of it. And I still think those are concerns. This was a pretty heated debate.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a clear partisan debate as well.
If you go a year, if you're sentenced a year, you can be deported. and that's the way it should be. And if this bill, if there had been I believe that if it had been a 365-day penalty, that the guy that shot Aaron Lowe, the football player, would have been deported, or would have been more subject to, or there would have been a greater way to deport that person.
Book, I
yes,
think was his name.
That person was committing crimes. He was robbing people at gunpoint and somehow still walking. These 364-day penalties did not let this go to the next level where he should have been deported. And I'm telling you that if you just hear the word 364 days, you're messing around with something when you make it 364 days. It's a year or it's not a year. If you make it 364 days, you're trying to avoid something, and there is a trigger to a year if you're sentenced to a year in jail, and it's appropriate that year in jail ought to make you subject to deportation. And I think it maybe it's 20/20 hindsight, but it needed to get back to a year. You need to have it a year because we have enough people that I keep reading in the paper how people are there for 364 days, and because of that, it never rises to the level that they should be rightfully deported.
Greg's right. 364 days is a term of art. It is intentional. The intent is that you get individualized adjudication.
Yeah, and it works real well.
The judge always has the discretion to deport. So this doesn't help deportations. This automates the process and takes it away from an individual conversation.
Yeah, it needs to be automated.
And I guess I'll have to mark it on my calendar a year from now because we won't really see any of the changes till new sentencings start to happen to see, if there are trouble spots. And I think that's one thing that the Utah legislature is good at when they do see problems. I think they go in there and refigure out how to make things work. So we'll be paying attention to that as well. Something that wasn't set to be triggered into Utah law until July 1st was put into kind of a permanent moratorium by Lieutenant Governor this week was HB 267. This is happening because legally, with all of the signatures getting counted and coming in right now on the union busting bill, they have to kind of put that one on hold right now. The UEA agreed with that. And so we had a statement saying officially, we're all on hold on this. Let's hang tight while this works its way through the system.
This was a little pro forma. I mean, it's required under the statute for her to say, this is the status. We've proclaimed that this is on hold.
But she didn't need the state seal and like a...
I don't know. She may. I mean, if you look at it, it is it's proclaiming the process. So I'm just saying it wasn't like her going, you know what, I'm going to celebrate this.
Yeah.
It was more her fulfilling her duties to the election and stating to the public where this issue is, stating to the legislature so that they can see a trigger to their actions if they choose to take an action in their next session or if they don't. So this was part of good form and process.
Do you think the legislature, Greg, is going to be looking at this process and maybe make some changes to this bill before it ever gets to the ballot in the full referendum, or will they stick it to the man and stick with it?
No, I truly have no inside knowledge on any of that, but I don't think it'll see its way on the ballot. I don't think it's gonna. I think it would. I think it will be repealed.
Okay, you heard it from Greg Hughes first. Tail.
In your example, my example there would be the tax reform that made it to the ballot to take off, and then they pulled it off the ballot. They rescinded it. So
they realized the error of their ways.
Yeah, well, it can take on a strong narrative in any election year, and it might be it might just take on a life of its own that's bigger than the election itself. And so I don't know. They might keep it. But my looking at it and looking at how that's happened in the past, that when it raises that level to be a ballot measure, they look at it and say, is this what we want the entire election to be about or not? And I think I don't think it will be.
I think that makes sense because I think if you're the legislature and you want control, you take it off the ballot, and you're still controlling the game. You're still controlling when and how it comes back. If you're the unions who gathered, you probably want it on the ballot, actually, because you're in control of the public dialogue. And so that's part of like who wins the strategy game. But I think if I'm the legislative leadership and I want control, the smart money is pull it yourself, have control, do a good job listening. That gets you further along than trying to fight this the whole time, even if you fight it and win. I think that's sort of lots of money.
Heading in that direction. Well, we've talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we have to finish with something that our Utah legislators, the governor, all very excited about. Utah ranking #1 overall for the third year in a row among U.S. states. This is based on 71 metrics across categories with the U.S. News and World Report. Is this a good reason to feel good about ourselves that we are ranked #1 for the third time in a row, or is this just more performative politics?
I like it. I think that to get these number one rankings, you can't just rest on your laurels. I think just as a state, I'm not talking just government. I'm talking you always have to be improving because states are all doing more. They're trying to be proactive. They're trying to see their economies grow. I think Utah has some incredible demographics. I think we have some of the the highest percentage of two-parent homes in America. I think we have the highest number hours of volunteerism as people in a state. I think our divorce rate is lower than other states. I think our marriage rate is higher. I think the number of kids we have. I think Utah is such a unique state in so many ways, and I get a little bit wrapped around the axle sometimes on the negative things, the cost of a house and the cost of living and congestion and all those things. But if you look at this state, there is so much good happening here, but if you were to just stay with the status quo, you would be passed up very quickly by other states in terms of how they are proactively working on these same issues, wanting to be the most livable state in America, just having upward mobility or whatever it may be. I think this state continues to improve, or you wouldn't see those rankings continue to stay, because I think it's a moving target. I think nothing is static. I think everybody's working to do better. And the fact that Utah finds itself in the number one ranking on a number of these measurements is a very positive thing.
Who's doing the measurements, I think, really matters. U.S. News and World Report, who did these, I think is doing a really good job. I will say to listeners, it's worth your time to rabbit hole on the rankings, though, because it's not all good news.
There's some lower numbers.
It is exactly where Utah is, like overall the best. And then it also points out where you could do better, like natural environment. We're ranked 49th in the nation, and it goes into, or 48th, and it goes into some detail about why. And it's mostly, as we would suspect, our air quality. It's just some of our
issues.
Yeah. And what's nice is they just give you how they weight it. It doesn't. There's not a ton of editorializing in it. Where we should be complimented it is how far we've come on education. I mean, we've really advanced our ranking on education. We're not doing well in terms of opportunity. We're not doing well in opportunities for women. That's notable. Some of our environmental issues are notable. Our healthcare is pretty good. Fiscal stability, we always do really well. Economy, crimes and corrections are really mixed. It's worth looking through, not as a means to take away from the number one.
Where can
I think
we
should be very proud of the number one. But what I like about what U.S. News does is it'll take you through each of their criteria and then all of their sub-criteria. So we can take a victory lap that we deserve. At the same time, the same report can tell us where we need to do better.
I like that.
Yeah, I liked that about it.
A little self-reflection, figure out where we can all be better. Next week, we'll figure out a way that we don't fight about any major issues. Just kidding. The good thing is that you guys could disagree and hopefully walk away mostly friends after this. So thanks for being a part of this. It's fun to have you in here.
It's good, and it's nighttime now again.
I know. So this is kind of exciting. We're still doing this Take Two After Dark, where we're recording on a Thursday evening. So thanks so much for listening. Tell your friends about us. Give us a rating, and we will be back again next week.